Got very good arms.
He didn't fall? Inconceivable.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and it's been an interesting few weeks for DC Comics. First, we had the layoffs, and we had cancellations. And along the way, Jim Lee actually went out, which he doesn't do very often. He did a pretty decent interview with The Hollywood Reporter. Certainly, I've talked a little bit about this here and there. I am going to talk about the portion where he discusses John Ridley's Batman tomorrow with Perch tomorrow the next day. We're going to discuss the rest of the interview here with Yul Carter from Fantastic Comics. How you doing, Yul?
I'm great. Early morning. Looking forward to it.
Well, I'm glad you could make it. I want to say this to the viewers. That's your first time visiting the channel, or you've been checking us out, but you haven't committed. There isn't a better time to subscribe to Thinking Critical YouTube than right here today. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. If you enjoy this conversation, give us a thumbs up. If you don't enjoy the conversation, give us an enormous thumbs down. Either way, give us feedback in the comments section. We love hearing from you guys. And there is a link to Yul Carter's Fantastic Comics YouTube channel as well in the video description, and you'll have a chance to subscribe at the end of the channel or at the end of the video as well. This is an interesting interview from Jim Lee. We did talk about it a little bit on the Comics Aficionados this weekend, but that's a 2-hour video. I can't expect everyone to go in there and kind of pull that information out. So I did want to talk about it specifically. The big question is this the beginning of the end for DC Comics? Are they going to continue publishing comic books? And this is what Jim Lee's had to say. Talking about comics, it is still the cornerstone of everything that we do. The need for storytelling, updating the mythology is vital to what we do. The organization leans on us, speaking of DC Comics, to share and establish the meaningful elements of the content they need to use and incorporate for all their adaptations. In other words, yes, they will continue creating comics. It's important to WarnerMedia as far as their other DC projects, as far as movies, streaming, television, and they're going to keep doing that. Were you glad to hear that, or do you think he's lying?
I don't think he's lying. I think that's exactly what you would expect anybody to say in his situation. This interview was very leading. I mean, it told us everything we wanted to hear as people that are reading it, but it wasn't like really hard-hitting or delving or following up on questions in any way. It was just a puff piece so that Jim Lee could get all this information out there. And what he's basically saying is, like you said, and like everybody would suggest, we make the stories that make the movies or TV that you watch later on down the line. And even if it's not super profitable, it's something that is going to be important for the company going forward. And then, of course, the entirety of it is that of this interview is that we're only going to do stuff that's profitable going forward.
Well, speaking of that, he did mention about the cancellations. He said the bottom 20 to 25% of their comic sales, they weren't breaking even. They were losing money, and it was time to cut them out and get what he called like more bang for your buck, i.e., get more sales per title out there, make more revenue per the comics that you put out there. It only makes sense to me. I wish that they could just publish a comic book for everybody, but they got to make money in the end. They certainly serve a corporate master now.
That's true. Think of a salad bar, though. I hate garbanzo beans. And, it's like a lot of people hate garbanzo beans, but they're always out there. And I think maybe sometimes you do need some of those smaller titles, even if they don't make a whole lot of money. Some of the stories that we see in movies and TVs that are DC or Marvel related are sometimes those, it's not the big events. It's just those little things that are connective tissue that happen for years and years. And sometimes it's those offbeat titles that you get these situations from. It would be really sad if we didn't get it. Like, if you're only saying that what you're putting out has to be profitable or we have to see a financial gain in it, it would prevent a lot of people from making things that, aren't necessarily, and I don't even mean to say acceptable, just something that isn't like, run of the mill or the norm so that the storytelling, mainstream. These are the things that might become mainstream later on. And if you don't develop those during this time, you could be missing out on a lot of creative opportunities. I'm sure Thanos really wasn't that big a character in the beginning, but now he's like, Marvel's greatest villain, basically. And you could say that with DC on like a lot of things also.
They're definitely going to need to keep taking chances. I imagine they're just going to take chances with less characters, which I definitely find a bit depressing. But moving on to another topic he broached, and that was as far as the pandemic shutdown, them moving away from Diamond over to Lunar, UCS, the two distributors that kind of came online to distribute DC Comics moving forward. And I don't know that I believe everything in this. There might be some extra spin on this one, but he's basically said the sales have exceeded all their expectations, and that the strength of the business is that of the same level or even higher than pre-COVID. And then he also talked about there was some fear mongering and this was going to be like a Heroes World debacle, but it's been nothing but further from the truth. I don't believe that the sales are equal to or even better than they were when they were with Diamond, because there's less stores now. It's hard for me to kind of buy into that one as far as just across the line.
Right. Well, I mean, they are canceling titles. Maybe if you're looking forward at what isn't going to be around and you're only cherry picking certain information, the Batman's probably doing very well. It's definitely doing better for me than it was when Tom King was writing it, and that was pre-COVID. Same thing with Dark Death Metal's coming out, and some creative changes, and then like we've been saying, we're going to cancel Aquaman or Teen Titans or Suicide Squad for whatever reason. It doesn't really matter right now. These aren't high-selling books. We're breaking even at best and probably losing money on a lot of them. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that. And then one of the main ones I feel is the quantity of books that are out on the bookshelf. It's not, it's so it inundates us with so much information and so much material to get that you can't have it all. And even if it was all 10s all the way across the board, if everything's a 10, you're just going to be judging things on different scales anyway. You can't like it all. And DC, I think, is kind of doing that. And I'm happy. I just wish it was a little less Batman.
It's kind of weird that they don't have back orders now. Like back orders are sales, so you're kind of taking that all out. But the sales are the same. But he does mention specifically talking about Batman, the Joker War storyline. Every single issue since its launch has gone up in numbers as far as orders. And he also mentions, and this one blows my mind. This is a Pele number that I sometimes when he says these big numbers, I'll be like, come on, Pele, let's bring our expectations back down to reality. But he says that Three Jokers first issue has already been ordered, like over 300,000 copies for an $8 book, which is absolutely insane. I would expect it like 150, 180, like something huge, but 300, that's like, we're talking Action Comics 1000 numbers kind of.
Well, so this has a bunch of different covers associated with it. And there is a lot of gimmickry for stores to have to get other covers. And it basically is, you have to order a lot. So I can see this happening. And I'm not sure, but I do believe right now DC is offering returns. So if you have the money and don't have to necessarily pay up front, there's no loss in this situation at all. And yeah, we're going to be touting big numbers on Three Jokers for sure. And we're going to also see, we've talked to Larry in chat and whatnot of Larry's Comics. He says that we're going to find out now how Lunar and how the other company does when it comes to shipping this large volume of comics for the first time. So this should be a big test.
It's not going to be a traditional size. It's going to weigh more. There's going to be a lot of different things to it. But it is Jeff Johns. It is on like the premier villain in the entire comic industry. It is Joker. This is also, obviously it's a Batman story, and it's been built up to since the end of the New 52, the Dark Side War. So not exactly, just out of thin air here. There's a lot of build up to this comic. Definitely the thing I'm most excited for moving forward. Like moving on to another topic that he hit, and we did discuss this one in the aficionados a little bit more than some of these other ones, but is the new digital strategy. And the example that he uses is Injustice, which was a video game. They created a digital-only comic book line to coincide with it, with Tom Taylor at the helm. It was wildly successful. It was the best-selling digital comic book series in the entire industry, outselling Batman, which, of course, you could also get in physical, so it kind of makes sense. It's not like it was more popular than Batman, but it did have more sales than Batman on digital. And because it was so successful, it ended up warranting being printed and distributed in physical as far as trades. And that being the model moving forward, they're going to produce digital-only content at a very reasonable price of $1. We've got Deceased books. We've got a new Injustice title right now. We got Harley Quinn, Black, White, and Red. We're supposed to be getting a Batman Black and White series. We're going to get these at a very good prices. If the demand is there, if the sales are there, they'll eventually get distributed out in physical as well, in trades. Doesn't directly help out the direct market immediately, but if it's popular in digital, it will eventually.
Yeah, I don't have any fear that bookstores, comic book stores would be able to get the material later on. It usually happens that way. The one thing I might say about that whole Injustice thing is that it started with a video game and then became a comic book. And you're already dragging people from the video game who are normally on the computer. So none of these other things that are out there are doing that. And we have yet to see digital sales really be significant enough to where you're going to want to pay and create, a team of a writer, an artist, a letterer, a colorist to do something that isn't going to be, a $3.99, $4.99 book that you can, get the stores to purchase. That's the one thing I might say as far as digital, but I think that's the way to go. I mean, these short little stories that are non-continuity based, basically, and anybody can just get one of them and really enjoy it. And maybe
just add-ons to the stuff that's popular. Get a couple of Deceased digitals out there. Get some ancillary titles out there on death metal for people interested in that. You got Joker War coming on right now. A couple of those titles should probably be digital only just to whet the appetite and see if you can get some of the market to move over there, get the word out, and maybe start building up that digital portfolio that obviously DC thinks is the future or very important to their future.
Yeah, I mean, you already have these artists on retainer, these creators. You might as well put them to work. And DC obviously is willing to do that. There's a part in the article where they're talking about the pencils down, and Jim Lee's all, we never said pencils down. And obviously, these items are still coming out. The rest of Supergirl, I guess, was digital, and it's going to be that way.
Extended on digital. There's been a few of them.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not afraid of that also. And I actually because Marvel just Marvel does their coupons in their books that you can, redeem. And that's and I like that. That's really cool. But DC, they're like, hey, this is our market strategy. This is something we want to actually make money on. This is our future. And Marvel just kind of like dabbles in it. I think they actually own the software that does like the close-in view stuff. I could be wrong, but yeah. Other than that, yeah. I mean, one of their companies created that crap.
It's terrible.
Yeah. But, other than that, Marvel doesn't seem to really care. But DC's like, they're in there.
They actually have a digital strategy that makes sense. Yeah. It's a sound strategy. I think you have to have a strategy to go in and enact it and go attack a market. You can't just go in willy-nilly. And it's good to see that DC has a strategy. Eventually, it will get out to the direct market if it's popular enough. And I like that they're actually attacking the market with some type of thought, into it rather than just seeing what happens. He also did discuss a couple of rumors that, we won't talk about these as much as length, but the first rumor he talked about was DC is going to only sell trades and original graphic novels and make a deal with Marvel for them to publish DC comics in the future. And this is what Jim Lee had to say. There is nothing further the truth than that. I don't know where you could even connect those dots. Why would we ever do that? Now, in the past, DC and Marvel have dabbled in the idea of having their competitor publish their comics. It made sense when DC was DC and Marvel was Marvel, but now that they're part of corporate entities entities that are in like a streaming war. You got HBO Max, you got Disney Plus, you've got DC content, going up against Marvel content. I just don't ever see crossover like that happening, is where you're going to farm out your content to the competition. So they basically take a big steaming pile, dump on your characters, and do nothing cool with them.
I wouldn't trust Marvel with any of my characters. No. And I don't know if in the way DC is these days, as cutthroat as they are, I wouldn't trust them if they were my Marvel characters.
What incentive would they have to make them good? They would put all their best characters on their stuff because they need to create stories for their platforms.
Oh, you know what's better than Superman? Hyperion kicking his ass. Yeah, I would. I mean, come on, please. I don't believe that. I mean, yeah. We can see Disney buy everything, of course.
Idea, but that time has passed. Now that they're part of at&t, WarnerMedia, Disney. It's a different industry as far as the big two goes.
I mean, when the mouse eats everything, then we can talk about it.
Hey,
but yeah,
they're going to have to open up their parks and start making some money before they can make any more big acquisitions.
True.
They're kind of they're becoming stretched a little thin on the debt.
Maybe they'll swap. They'll say, "I'll give you an Aliens for a Bat family." Or something like that. Yeah,
just think about that. They just pulled their license of Alien and Predator from Dark Horse. I'm sure they weren't making a ton of money on that, but it was a little extra money. If they wanted the money like Marvel did, they would continue license out. They brought back Conan, they brought back Star Wars. They're bringing back everything that they can because they want to do it all in house. So Another rumor that he addressed was at&t hates comics and wants to get out of the comic business. And this is what Jim Lee had to say. Comics serve a lot of different purposes, and one of them is a great way to incubate ideas and creating the next great franchises. We want to continue that. The perfect example being Punchline. Sure, at&t might think comic books are a headache, and are they really worth it? But then you have a character like Punchline, which has a lot of money cachet coming along with it, not just in comic books, but within cartoons, which they're definitely going to need for HBO Max. Certainly on the big screen in with the other mediums as far as streaming and television. It's a cheap way to create new ideas, create new characters, and see what connects with an audience.
Yeah, I think Jim Lee is talking to at&t execs right there when he says that. For sure, all of that makes sense, and we all look at it and say, oh, yeah, I agree. But he's trying to convince them that we're important for sure. And I think it's obvious that, they would want to keep DC around for that aspect of it. But at the same time, they probably feel like we could just have our Hollywood writers or movie people, create. They could create Punchline too, It wouldn't. Yeah,
but when you really want to test it out in your $250 movie production, the first, your original character. Or do you want to flesh the character out in comics and animation where it's a little bit cheaper and lower risk?
Sure thing, but I mean, Gabriel Hardman, who had that Green Lantern book that came out a couple of days ago, he does like storyboards and character designs for stuff. They're already working in those fields. In fact, they're probably getting paid a lot better. It's funny that I wish if at&t was on board and they're like, all right, we agree. DC produces all these characters and they flesh them out and they got a look. And let's pretend movie studios and TV studios, let's just pretend they actually wanted to go with the look of the character, because they usually don't. They could actually maybe say, hey, you know what? We're going to actually pay these writers money that is like what we pay people in Hollywood, script writers and stuff like that. We're going to actually pay these artists that work on comic books as if they were actually doing, character breakdowns and sketches for the movie. They were actually, there's been so many times a scene in a movie that's comic book related has been straight lifted, whether it's like Year One with Miller and Mazzucchelli and, Spider-Man stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, I totally remember that scene from this comic book. And those people didn't get paid that money for it. And I'm sure some Hollywood dude's making a grip more than a person who pencils the comic books. So it would be nice to see if at&t was on board and said, yeah, I totally agree. You guys are the shit. You make the stuff for us to go out and make $1 billion on. Let's pay those guys a little bit more, these ladies a little bit more.
That would be ideal, and that would definitely bring in more talent in the comic industry. Hopefully, we'll get back to that point. Yule, that basically will wrap up our discussion about Jim Lee's interview in Hollywood Reporter. Obviously, there was more to it. There will be a link in the video description if you want to go read it all for yourself. It was interesting, but it is corporate speak. It's not like he's going off the cuff and just saying whatever he likes. It's obviously at&t, WarnerMedia were not happy with the uproar following all the information, and they sent him out there to do a little bit of damage control, a little bit of corporate speak, and talk to some of the issues or some of the questions that people had out there. I think he did a good job. We definitely got some information about what DC's strategy is moving forward, and I thought it was helpful. I appreciate you coming on, providing another set of eyes on this. If people enjoy what Yule had to say here today, there is an opportunity to subscribe to his channel right now. There should be an icon on the screen. Just go click it. You go to his channel, subscribe. I highly recommend it.
Thank you very much.